Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast. This is the Sunday show looking at the Cup Series, making some Richmond picks. We're coming to you live from a Drury Hotel in Dayton, Ohio. So if someone else decides they want to enter the exercise room at 5 in the morning on Easter Sunday, let's cut the show short. Let's get into it. A lot of it's going to come down to how you want to build, whether that's going to be 3 hogs or 2 hogs. The other thing is, how much do your hogs cost? And that ultimately is going to determine, and when we say hogs, we could also say dominators. That's going to determine the rest of your lineup. In previous seasons, we had mispriced, and no really fault of DraftKings own, hogs or dominators. They were affordable, and that allowed the optimal lineup to be much more balanced, and you could spend up for your value picks and get pretty good points, especially when you got a ton of dominator hog slash points, fast lap slash lead from Bubba Wallace. In other races, we witnessed Ford Larson, Christopher Bell, even William Byron in this race, despite wrecking out, were expensive. They had the drivers that led laps, and thus you had to go down to the 6,000 range. You had to go to the 6,100 range. You go to last fall's race, you got some affordable dominators slash hogs, and you get a little bit more balance in your lineup, and you can spend a little bit more for your value picks. And when you can spend a little bit more for value, then your projection or your recommendation, not your recommendation, your requirements is a little higher. And if you run back even further and you find races where you've got to spend a little bit more on your dominators, and so you have to be a little bit cheaper with your value, then you lower the bar a little bit. This one really doesn't require a lot of spending at the top, but we do see that our bar at the bottom has been lowered. If we had affordable, or if you do have affordable dominators or hogs that you project from what you see, then yeah, you're going to want around 50 fantasy points from your value picks. If you believe that no, in fact, the guys that are going to lead the race are likely a Kyle Larson, it's a Martin Truex Jr., you may even be spending up on a Denny Hamlin as well. If you're going to spend at the top end, then obviously on the back end, you're not going to have the balanced value pick, and you're going to have to go a little bit cheaper. And in going so cheaper, you will have to lower your point requirements. So in theory, what you're doing is you're getting the points on the top and then just kind of forfeiting on them on the bottom. Whereas if you were going a little lower at the top, then you could get the points at the bottom by spending up. Just going to spend in one spot. Either way, you're still trying to achieve maximized point per dollar potential. And the way that it's looking right now going into this race, I believe we're going to spin. So let's run through, look at some projections. Kyle Larson, if you didn't know, what I talked about all week was Group A versus Group B. The Group A and B data is going to be skewed nonstop. And then Saturday morning practice comes on, and NASCAR DFS Twitter loses their mind about Group A versus Group B. And I'm just going to give them the benefit of the doubt and be as charitable as possible and assume that they had already known that. They just didn't choose to talk about it. Fine, they don't do 7 million podcasts during the week like me. So the point with Larson is no, I'm not happy that he was in Group A and didn't collect the best data, but the track had rubbered up in Group B. Then he goes back out in qualifying round 1, and it's fine. He goes out in qualifying round 2, and again, it's fine. He checked every box. And then if you listen to the podcast earlier this week, one thing that I was going to value in Group A was if you could put together pretty fast long run speed. A, long run speed is always good, being able to replicate your laps, lap after lap after lap. But B, if you run 25 laps, at the very least, you're going to get some time on a rubbered up racetrack. Your first 5 laps, probably not going to tell us anything. Your first 15, probably not going to tell us anything. But if you're still out there 30 laps in and you're running down 114.1s on, now it's not the most rubbered up. Obviously, Group B is going to be slower, but that is the closest thing we're going to get. And he's running 114, so we compare that to, like, who was really good? William Byron was pretty solid in Group B, so let's go down and see what Willie B was doing late in his run. I mean, it's not a fair comparison, obviously, but he's running 114s. You could argue that Byron was the best in Group B. He was pretty close. I think Bo Wallace was right there with him. And you could see there's about, what, half a second difference between Group B and Group A, just based on the condition of the track. But one of the things that I have done is obviously, if you just put your Group A and Group B here, you can see you get a better comparison. Maybe you don't want to compare apples to oranges. Maybe when you're doing your practice data today and you're looking at the fancy NASCAR spreadsheet, you're kind of just comparing your Group A guys, you're comparing your Group B guys. Another thing that I did with the spreadsheet that I like to do at the tracks where this tends to happen is also just say, all right, just show me the Group B guys, compare them against each other. And so I can see Bubba Wallace under his conditions, really good. Overall, his top 25, if we compare it with Group A, is what? 12th, which is actually really solid. We get a little bit better picture of, all right, what about under the conditions that other people were racing with? He was the best. Todd Gilliland's actually pretty good among this group in Group B. I don't know if he can finish where he's qualified, but William Byron is up there as well. So that's just one of the things you can do with the fancy NASCAR spreadsheet if you have access at Race for the Prize. Jump in there. April package available now. All right, let's continue, shall we? Well, let's run through some of these drivers and see who we like. Again, I apologize if anyone decides that they want to come work out Easter Sunday at 5 in the morning and interrupt this beautiful podcast. Do you believe in Chase Elliott? I have a hard time believing in Chase Elliott. It hasn't been the greatest track for him. He did get some hog points a couple seasons ago. I think he'd go back to 21 fall race. He got 26. Hendricks and Chevys seem to have figured something out. Maybe Toyota really did just double down at Phoenix. And what we expected coming into the season, if you hit rewind, remember it. Oh, the new Toyota, the new Ford, they're probably going to struggle. They might struggle in this new package. And then they knocked it out of the park at Phoenix. We had to completely reset everything that we thought. Well, perhaps it was just that the Toyotas really winning that Phoenix race with a specific setup and nailed that specific racetrack. And then, as I mentioned all week, the gap between Chevy and Toyota may have been overstated. Chase Elliott was in the top 5 for almost half of that race at Phoenix. William Byron was in the top 5 for almost half of that race at Phoenix. They simply made the wrong pit road strategy call at the end and got caught in traffic. Now I'm talking myself in the Chase Elliott, which I really wasn't that bullish on before. But he is starting second. We haven't seen like a complete coalescence of hog points or dominator points from the very front, but it does tend to go to the front. I like Larson. I guess I am warming up to Elliott, but there are other places that I think I might go to based on track history. I mean, you look simply at Denny Hamlin is getting you hog/dominator points every single time we unload. Martin Truex Jr. every single time we unload. Why is that going to change? It's going to be hard not to play them. And so it's easy to go to Larson. It's harder to go to Elliott when you have these two guys. So you will probably get a little bit of leverage. No one else has really demonstrated this type of consistency. Although Brad Keselowski's got a 21 average over here, it is inflated by that big race last fall where he was awesome. I don't know if they've got it this year. But then also this 70 back during that COVID year where he was great at the short flat tracks. Everybody thought he was going to go into Phoenix and win the championship, and probably almost could have had not for been a bad day on pit road. And Logano going to inflate that average because of that big 74 last fall where he is the outlier that could really just mess anything up. Not specifically him, but if you look at where he started in that race, 17th. But again, he was another one of those Group B qualifiers last season who didn't really flash a lot of speed because he was racing under specific conditions. When we get to the race, boom goes to dynamite. And that was 2022. And that was also, right, he would go on to win at Phoenix. They may have had a little bit of a setup there that they knew and understood. Going back to our board, I'm not a believer in Chastain. That could come back to bite me. This is not necessarily an overreaction to practice, although it's not great. I mean, you can look at his laps, and so you see this bright red, oh, 5, 10, 15, everything lap average wise is bad news. He was in Group B or Group A, which doesn't help. But when you look, I almost looks like he's Sunday driving out here. We pull up Chastain, he just doesn't fire off, and then just kind of goes out there and twists some laps around. You can see clearly right here, you got a lot more dark green in Group A. He goes out and it's really just not even hustling at all. There's not a ton of fall off. Maybe he was working on something where he didn't want to burn his stuff off. I wanted to see, like, all right, how deep can I run if I started off a little bit slower? I don't know if that's always the best bet. Not a terrible fall off. But that's something I would say from a guy like, all right, let's get a top five. That's not what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to beat Kyle Larson today, you're probably going to need to fire off. You're probably going to not fall off if you want to lead all these laps. I don't want to overreact to practice, though. I'm more so concerned with him just not being good here last fall. Maybe this just isn't the greatest track for Trackhouse. Bowman's got you some classic Group A stats, but he was trending in the right direction. I don't think I can play him in this one. But Walsh becomes intriguing. These are pretty good numbers for Group B. I know it's 19, 15, 14, 12, but when we separate and look at what he did amongst his actual peers, he was top of the board. Let's look at some of Bubba's stats here in Group B. Lap 21, he is at a 1:14.1. We look at it amongst, these are mainly all Group B drivers. He's right there in the mix. When we look at firing off, Nemechek's not in that group. Pretty much firing off about the same as everybody else. Group B just really isn't flashing a lot of speed, a lot of difference. Maybe Kozlowski is a little bit more long run. Yeah, I would argue he does. Kyle Busch, I believe also in Group B, has a little bit more long run. It's not amazing. It's not terrific. He could get up there. He did have a good race car last year. He is a little affordable. I wouldn't completely wipe him off my board like you would have probably past races with Bubba Wallace starting fifth. Remember, Cosmica had a race-winning car, third most laps led at Richmond last year, bad day on pit road. It was a good Saturday for Todd Gilliland, and I've tightened up the projections a bit because the optimizer kept spitting him out. I think it's fair to give him 4 fast lap points. If you just go through the numbers, we see a lot of hog points just basically come from guys up front, and you're going to want to distribute them accordingly. I mean, we go down to the board, and we're averaging almost 2 or more for drivers 20th to first. So if he is starting in the top 10, and we usually see around 10, so I'm being a little conservative, saying I just don't see you having a lot of speed to give him down to 4. But you're going to want to put those points in because they are going to make a difference for who is in the optimal line. But ultimately, I dialed him down at 12, which actually might be aggressive based on his results this year. But I didn't want to completely bury him. And still at that point, he's finally down to a 5.3x. You start projecting him any higher, he's going to fall into a bunch of optimal lineups, which is a little too risky for me. Truex, Group B. Speeds are fine for Group B. Remember, we can't compare them. We look against everybody else. I'm okay with him not being the fastest in practice. Truex, great on long runs, strategy, and with his position, if he gets up to the top 3, he's going to get you a little bit of place differential. He could get 20 to 25 fast lap/laps led points, not even by being the best driver, just by going with a different strategy sequence, by running long, doing different things. So he wouldn't be a quote unquote dominator. One of the reasons why I don't like dominator is going to be something that you'll see at Richmond. Although Chris Buescher did dominate this race last year, the driver that leads a lot of laps at Richmond, there's often quite a few. So the idea that 7 drivers dominate a race is just silly to begin with. And the drivers that cycle to the lead cycled to the lead rather than dominantly driving to the lead. That's why Hog or whatever name you want to come with was much more preferable because I do not expect Truex to dominate in this race. He has in the past, but I do expect for him to score fantasy points. And that's really what we're doing. Get yourself in that mindset, in that mind frame. I think often, and I've preached about this, so I won't go too much. But when you are like, oh, I need a dominator, well, then you're looking for a guy who's going to completely control the race. And when that's the case, you have a certain criteria in your mind. You're looking for certain statistics. And here's the thing with Truex today, you're not really going to find those. Maybe you look at past track history, and that's going to lead you in a direction. But if you're looking at practice, then it's not going to suggest that he can dominate this race. But if you get in the mindset of, I just need him to lead laps and run some fast laps here or there, then like, oh, well, the practice speed works out. Now you're much more likely willing to play him. You look at what he did at Phoenix. He didn't win the race, but he ran long at times, got on different strategies, and that enabled him to score fantasy points. Truex didn't dominate at Phoenix, but he did score fast laps and laps led points because of his strategy. So I think it would behoove you to, however you have to frame it, you're looking for guys that are going to score points more so than dominate. Score points. Be in a position to score points. And when you get into that frame, then you're going to use the statistics in a different manner. And you're going to be, I think it'll be beneficial. And so I'm in the, can he score points? Yeah, he can get me some place differential. He's obviously going to get fast laps because of his position. He can also lead laps because of his willingness to strategize. Ty Gibbs, much more expensive this week, giving you a little bit of that Group A kiss of death. Do I dare fade him, being that he is running so well? Yeah, I think I will. I'd rather go to Truex. I'd rather go to Hamlin. I could be wrong. I understand he can't, he can't control where he qualifies or what group he is in. I just rather roster drivers that have pretty fast race cars, that have a better starting position, or have demonstrated that they really have Richmond figured out. And it's not just like I know how to get in and out of the turns. This is a 400 lap race with a bunch of different strategies. It plays out really uniquely. And so if you're Denny Hamlin and you've been through a Richmond race hundreds of times, or Martin Truex Jr., probably not hundreds, but that many times, you know what you need to do when you need to do it. Ty Gibbs hasn't really done that. I know he has won the Xfinity Richmond race, but an Xfinity race, you just go out there and run. Yeah, fast car, go lead some laps, and then we'll go home. Richmond, 2-tire, no tire. He just never had to deal with that. Okay, you were leading the race. Now you got to restart in 8 behind 2-tire guys, 4-tire guys. And we need to make sure that we get to that. It's not nearly as cut and dry as a Richmond race where we might restart twice in the Xfinity Series and you just go run away to hide and win the race. If I can't go to Gibbs, then I can't go to Cindric. I'm not ready to buy in on Logano yet. Yeah, he has been good at Richmond over his long career, but that's a long career. This season is just not going in the right direction. I don't think Penske really has all that much speed. He wasn't very good. Phoenix, it was a good day for him on Saturday, but I just am not ready to go to Logano. He's got those Group A stats. Those don't really help us that much. Might not have the car dialed in. Hamlin is where I want to go. Can't help it. Yeah, and maybe you get leverage. Maybe people see these practice data speeds and just say, oh, what's wrong with Hamlin? It doesn't really matter what Hamlin's practice speeds ever say. And one of the feathers in his cap or added benefits to rostering him is you always get that boost of, I wonder if it's going to show up on here, fast pit road. So this is from Bozzi. If you're not following him, you probably should, or Racing America. These are your median pit times this season. And Joe Gibbs Racing is your team. Let's see if I can, there it is. Sit down. So Denny Hamlin 9.3, that's a huge difference. And as I've been saying this week, Richmond is a unique race. It's going to come down to pit road. It's going to come down to cycling. And if you've got a fast pit crew, that's going to be a huge advantage. I would lean into this. I would lean into Byron, lean into Elliott. We'll talk about Bell in a bit. These are all heavy hitters. You can get Kyle Larson on the list as well. So there's that in this fantasy spreadsheet. Another thing with Hamlin is this is the classic. This guy could be finishing first story or starting first story. He just missed out on round 2 of qualifying with his 11th position. So on the grid, he's 11th fastest. But that doesn't tell the whole story. Could very easily be one of these guys, if not 4/10 of a second, if he would have advanced. You could say the same for Blaney, but this has not been one of his best racetracks. We got the classic Group A skew. I can't do it. I would much rather have Ham. I'm leaning into the chalk if you're not surprised, and we'll build around that here in a second. But I'm liking Larson. Elliott is on the burner. I'm thinking about turning the heat on and cooking that up, but I'm not sure. Might put it back in the fridge. Truex is there. He's cooking. Hamlin's in the oven. He's cooking. No Blaney for me. Thaw out William Byron. Throw him in the microwave. He's in there as well. Really fast times for Group B. Checks the box. Even if he isn't the number one hog, one who hogs all these fantasy points, he can get you place differential, unlike Larson, and he can get you more than Truex. He's going to cruise up into the top 5. And as we have seen, once you get around that range into the top 5 area, it's going to open the door to somewhere around 20 hog points. He is only 10.5. He finishes up there. We have seen that type of driver go off. Really what scares you with Byron, he is cheaper than Hamlin, is if Hamlin goes hog wild with the hog points, then that probably defeats the Byron pick. If Hamlin has a good day, maybe Byron stays alive. The other question is if Bell comes alive, that could defeat Byron. But there's a really good case that Byron, with a good day, is in the optimal lineup. Obviously, Byron, with a great day, is in the optimal lineup. And as we've talked about and documented this week, if you haven't been paying attention to the podcast, he had the best car last spring, gets in that late race wreck with Bell. Should have won the race. In the fall race, he gets wrecked on pit road or suffers contact early in the race. You never get to see what he had. Probably had a top 5 car. If you want to look at this year and look at Phoenix, he didn't get the finish that you wanted, but he ran almost 50% of the laps inside the top 5. I know his finish was 18th, but you can see clearly here that his driver rating was the 9th best. He decided to go get tires at the end, had a really bad restart at the end that killed his finish. There really is nothing else that you need to see from William Byron. Again, he also just barely misses out on qualifying. And if we look at his Group B data, it's there. So far, we like Hamlin as a whole. We like Byron as a whole. We obviously like Larson. We like Truex. And then Elliott is the next place I'm going. Have we learned our lesson with dismissing Buescher? This has been a great racetrack for Buescher. Probably should trust the guy. I trust the guy. I don't think I can play the guy. Yeah, that's just where I stand. It's been a good track. He knows what he's doing here. He has improved steadily over the years. But this race, and racing in general doesn't exist in a vacuum or in isolation. It's in comparison to other drivers, and while Buescher has been good, Byron's been good. Hamlin's been good. Put some respect on the name. Hamlin's get you 30 hog points every single race for like a decade. It's nice that Buescher's running well now, but Hamlin's been here. Larson won the race in the spring. Truex has won multiple races at Richmond. Yeah, Buescher is better. Buescher won the last race. But these other guys are not chopped liver. He can get the place differential checkpoint. He can get you into the top 5. He can bake in some fast lap points. So with that being said, if the William Byron play kind of works, if he's average, Buescher can kind of put that up too and save you a little bit of money. My expectation is not, if I'm playing Buescher, I don't expect him to be the number 1 or number 2 guy. But maybe I can build a lineup where he's the number 3 guy in. I don't think he's going to be the number 4. And then maybe things work out and he ends up being the number 2. But then at that point, if I've already spent up on 1 and 2 and Buescher becomes a top play, then that lineup's probably not going to work either. If Buescher ends up being a top play, then we're going to end up with a more balanced lineup. And that more balanced lineup will have extra money to boost up the value, whereas my lineup, likely with Buescher as my number 3 guy, is going to have cheaper value guys, and that's not going to work. So if Buescher puts together another great race, even with a higher price tag, he's still cheap enough that he could absolutely mess things up, because there really isn't a lot of value out there, as we're going to see here in a second. Not that interested in Busch. Priest is one of the guys where I start to think about playing. I liked him a lot this week. He was in my DraftKings video this week. He ran better than his finish at Phoenix. He decided to run long at the end, and he ran out of fuel, so he didn't get the result. They should have gotten 18th driver rating. It's not the greatest. He finished 23rd. Maybe could have had a top 15 driver rating had things played out differently. Ran well here last year. I like what Stewart Ford has done at Richmond and at Phoenix recently. He is starting pretty close to the front. If we look projection-wise, it's not bad, but he's got to get to 10th here. That's pretty aggressive. I don't think that's going to happen, and I'm likely going to dial that down a notch. That's way too hot. I'm going to dial Gregson down too. And since we are talking about value, we might as well look over here at the value board and see that it's not really fun at the moment. We're seeing McDowell at 7,000, Stenhouse, Hocevar, Eric Jones. They're really not that tasty of value. There's nothing screaming out at this week. And if we just look at the raw points, when you put a ceiling projection on McDowell, he gets you 52 fantasy points. That works in a balanced lineup, but that's pretty aggressive. We start to go down, and the cliff is there. It is real that our value expectations, 42 for Gregson, 41 for Priest, and that's getting them with 11th place finishes. And we're only getting 40 fantasy points out of them. Austin Dillon getting a solid finish, 39. Jones, solid finish. This is being pretty aggressive, and we're not getting 40 fantasy points. And it's looking like we're going to need to spend up on a Denny Hamlin, on a Kyle Larson, which then means we're going to have to save. And we're going to have to dip down here and just accept that, all right, this is not going to be one of the Richmond builds where we can get 50 fantasy points from a value pick. And even then, I mean, let's say the Buescher thing even works. And you're like, all right, time to maximize the value. And we're still really not getting that much from our 7K values and our 8K values. So maybe with value being the way that it is, it's much easier, or whether it's easier or not, to lean into spending up for the top end where we know we can get points, as opposed to spending down at the bottom where we don't know we're going to get the points. We don't know if the guys at the bottom are going to be efficient. We don't know if they're going to score at all. So if you're going to spend and you want to spend wisely or spend on what you think is a sure thing, Sometimes you go into a race and you're like, all right, yeah, I can take this punt play because I know he's going to get X points, or I know he's going to be efficient, I know he's going to work. You don't really have that security blanket this week. If we're going in spending, when we're putting our money and laying our money down on the table, we're going in and we're buying something, we have a pretty good idea what we're going to get from Larson. Truex, Hamlin. It's not for sure. It's never for sure with a hog/dominator. But usually heading into a race, when we go down to the value guys, like, oh yeah, this is going to work. This is a pretty safe, chalky value play. I don't know how much chalky value plays there are. And it's a bit almost like a mystery box. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know how you're going to pay for. And that doesn't mean none of them are going to hit. Because again, it's Richmond. We've got cycling, we've got strategy, 2-tire, no tire. And ultimately, I don't think the value picks are going to make a whole lot of sense. Again, if we look at the projections and look and see where we've got these guys at the moment, and I'm going to go to the point that I don't think we know who's going to hit. Stenhouse's stats and practice don't tell us he's going to hit, but he could, and it could just be strategy or hanging on to the lead lap or other guys failing. Right? Eric Jones could work, and it wouldn't be based on his track history, which hasn't been good. It wouldn't be based on his practice data, which isn't that great. You could make some sort of lengthy confirmation bias argument about, well, at Phoenix, he was good at the short run before he got into the dirty. If you're really kind of going a little out there, you're reaching. In the end, it'll be more likely that Jones was in the lineup because no one else was in the lineup. I hate to say that to you. They're like, it works out for Jones because it just didn't work out for anyone else. Or he was in the right position, held position, and he ended up fitting. 2-tire, no tire, cycles, when the caution falls, when the caution doesn't fall. I will not be surprised if in the end we look at this and say, well, he did it because no one else did it. And if we're going to go with that mindset, and that's not really the craziest thing for a Richmond race, especially a Richmond race in a new package where we kind of have to just submit and accept the volatility, submit to the variance. If that's the case, then track history is not going to matter. Practice isn't going to matter. And it's just going to be who doesn't make mistakes. And maybe you just go as cheap as you can. And this is kind of the route that I ended up diving into at Phoenix a couple weeks ago, where I wasn't really in love with a lot of the value. And I like chasing certain drivers at more expensive spots. And Justin Haley really opened up a lot of those spots. And Justin Haley was starting in the back. And so then I said on Twitter, like, all right, it's time for confirmation bias time. I got this play that works. Now I've got to make up some reasons of why I'm playing him. And I don't even know if I went in and made up some reasons to play him or not. I played him because he worked. I think I did make up some confirmation. I looked for some specific number somewhere, like, oh, well, this is good, so that's why I'm playing him. If we just want to be honest with ourselves, maybe we're just punting to punt. And you got Haley starting in the back again, and you just hope that he goes out there and turns laps. You just hope that he hangs in there. Rick, where here it is. You want your confirmation bias argument for these Rick Ware cars aren't as bad as they used to be. They're kind of getting better, blah, 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 blah. You can tell yourself that. Fill in the blanks. I really don't want to get into that. But you could look and say, all right, he did get solid finishes at Coda and Bristol. Now the contrarian or the smart person would say, dude, that's a road course, and Bristol was a wild thing. Well, even if Bristol was a wild thing, he still earned a top 20 in a Rick Ware car. It was a wild thing for everybody else, and not everybody else got a top 20. That is a pretty good argument. Like, at the end of the day, it's where you finish. You run 500 laps in a Rick Ware car under the same circumstances and conditions as everyone else, and you get a top 20, that's on you. That's on your car. That's a good job. That's an attaboy. Look, his driver rating is 14th in that race. Put some respect on it. Well, he wasn't that good at Phoenix and got an inflated finish. That's racing, kids. That's called attrition. That's called not making mistakes. That's called not getting penalties. That's pretty normal. And we play that every single week, especially from our punts, especially from our value drivers. We say, hey, can he run around 25th? Great. And then, bad things are going to happen to drivers in the top 25. The top 25 is not going to be perfect. The 25 fastest drivers are not going to be perfect on pit road. They're not going to avoid mistakes. They're not going to avoid tire failures. They're not going to avoid penalties. And some of those top 25 fastest cars just may have bad days. All those things can happen that slot them down, and it can happen to 3 or 4 of them easily. The top 25 drivers are not going to have a perfect day. That's statistically impossible. It's fair to assume 4 or 5 fail. And if Haley can just run 25th all day, then he gets 4 or 5 more spots. And you can adjust your numbers accordingly, but you're going to typically finish a little bit better than your driver rating if you don't make mistakes. And he has been running pretty mistake-free over this season. You can see, again, Las Vegas, mistake-free, finishes better than where he runs. Kind of the beauty of this Rick Ware program at times is we're not going out there and hustling like madmen. They're going out there and they know what kind of equipment they're in. They know what boxes to check. They know what they're doing. They know it's going to be a slow growth program. Again, all of this is confirmation bias. We've already picked Haley, and we're going back after the fact and looking at everything to confirm what we were already going to do. It's terrible scientifically, but it worked at Phoenix. So we're going back to the original point of we don't really like getting this value. And we do like the guys at top, and they're expensive. And you got Justin Haley starting 36. So why the hell not? And if we're playing that game, well, then of course you can throw Kaz Gralla into that game too. We like Haley more as a driver. We like Haley probably more in his equipment. But is Gralla going to have the very same approach? Yes. Is his equipment that much different? No. Is he a strong pivot off of Justin Haley, who people will probably go to? Yes. Does he give you a little bit more money? Yes. Look, he could finish 2 or 3 laps down behind Haley at Richmond, but still that might just only be one position in this race. Double punting them, probably a bridge too far. But if Haley is on your board, Gralla is on your board, even Hemrick is going to be on your board, it's a concern for me. I don't know if I really want to go to Ty Dillon. Probably not going to go that far. Not that crazy and watch him be the one to go to. You want to expand it, it's fine. It's all pretty much the same story. I would much rather have guys that have been driving this short track package who are with the teams every single week. I really say Haley's the guy. And Gralla just becomes the guy by association. Hemrick's there every week. Drinking the pre-workout. Getting the morning in. It's already 6 a.m., so I imagine someone's going to bust in the doors soon. I was going to hope to build some lineups. That's probably not going to happen. We might as well just jump into that, because I would guarantee it is 6, so someone's going to want to work out. And good for them. All right, let's start our build, folks. Oh, no, I didn't want to do that. And play around. So we'll start with Kyle Larson. And I may go silent to do the finish of the show if someone does walk in, and you just watch me build. So if I'm not talking at the end of this podcast, I'm just here building because someone is next to me on the treadmill. So we'll do it like that. Next thing we'll do is we'll go down towards some value, and we'll go ahead and throw in Justin Haley. Down on Haley Street, where the girls are easy and Nerf Herder. I obviously don't know Nerf Herder that well. I've forgotten the lyrics. Justin Haley. Let me shrink that so that it's fitting on the screen. All right, we got 9,200 per driver. Let's go to Hambone. All right, I got two hogs. I got a value play. Those are my cheapies. We'll go with let's go with three hogs. And if I go with three hogs, I'm going to need a second value play. I'm crazy enough to lean into Stenhouse this week. I know I didn't talk about him much. People don't like to play him. These guys are all kind of all the same. It's really a crucial spot, I would argue. Obviously, here's our punts. But this Austin Dillon, Eric Jones, Hosever, Stenhouse, McDowell, I feel strongly that one of them, at least one of them, can slide close to the top 15 and make it work. I mean, I think McDowell's probably, if you can get there, right? We didn't talk about McDowell. Yeah, McDowell starting 31st. Lap times were pretty good for Group B, right? He's in Group B. We put him in Group B. We rank him up against the other drivers. Sorry. All right, look, pretty good Group B driver speeds, awesome. Just didn't qualify well. I know this hasn't been a great racetrack for him, but he was good in the spring. If I can get to him, fine. I don't know if I'm always going to be able to get to him. If I can, he probably is your only chalk. Otherwise, you're going into no rhyme or reason, Hosever, Jones, Dillon. Dillon does have the track history if you want to make that argument. And we probably shouldn't overreact to the practice session that he was in. If we had to make a strong argument based on like all possible data, then Dillon would likely be that guy. And that's how most people are going to approach this. They're going to look at all possible data, and Dillon will likely be their value pick. But remember, we sort of already kind of subscribe to the idea of we don't necessarily believe that the value pick is going to be based on the data in front of us. We don't necessarily believe that the fastest in practice or track history. I'm much more apt to go in the direction that our value driver is going to be decided based on pit sequencing strategy. And if I go that route, it really separates me from everyone else and allowed me to diversify my ownership as opposed to falling on Austin Dillon more. It'll get me more into Stenhouse. It'll get me more into Hosever. It'll likely get you a little bit more Eric Jones. But again, that doesn't really change too much of the conversation that we still are on kind of this group. I think they're all going to slot in as that number 5 guy because I don't think we're going to save enough money at the top. Why is Carl Larson's thing popping up like that? 6,600. AW2. There we go. We fixed Kyle Larson's salary on the screen. We got 92.5 left per driver. Let's just go ahead and throw Truex in since we're doing it. We're doing it, folks. We're doing it. Hard to do with the digital keyboard on a treadmill. My apologies. All right, that gives you way too much money. Now I can go Christopher Bell in that spot, can't I can get rid of Stenhouse. It seems way too forgiving, doesn't it? Oh, it's because I was going to say that's the problem right there. There we go.